All right, we're recording. All right, so welcome to our Family Planning and Gender Empowerment webinar this month. I'll introduce Kelly Dennings to cover the first portion.
Thank you all. It's great to be with you again. My name is Kelly and my pronouns are she and her. I want to acknowledge that I'm currently on the traditional territory of the Powhatan, Monacan, and Cherokee land. If you didn't join us last time, just a little bit about me. I started with the center last year, and I have a background in recycling and waste, but I got a public health degree in 2018, and I'm a certified family planning counselor. So I'm very excited to have a guest speaker with us today, Dr. Richard Grossman, who's an OBGYN, and he's going to tell us all we want to know about voluntary family planning and the different contraceptive methods and what's on the horizon. So I'm excited to hear about that. As many of us on this call know, when people have the ability to choose if and when to have children, they tend to have smaller families. And when there's gender equity, including girls being able to stay in school and have equal opportunities, they tend to delay starting a family, increase the length of time between births, and have fewer children, all of which benefits the planet too. Before I turn it over to Dr. Grossman, let me just run through a few slides. So Sarah, if you'll move to the next slide. As I mentioned last month, in the winter of 2019, we conducted a national survey to analyze the awareness, attitudes, behavioral intention, and norms around the topics of population, consumption, family planning, and climate change. Last month, we gave you a sneak peek to some of the data, and the question has been asked of me, when will the report be done? And hot off the presses, it was published last Thursday. So Sarah is going to put in the chat the link, thank you, Sarah, of where you can go and download anything you want to know about this report, which can actually be pretty lengthy, but at least run through maybe the executive summary. Next slide. So we surveyed 899 people across the United States for a 95% confidence interval. If you want more information about the statistical validity, please feel free to talk with me afterwards, but I won't go through it on the call right now. Next slide. Nearly half of all US pregnancies are unintended. So even though our fertility rate in the United States is not as high as those in other nations, we still have a lot of work to do to take full responsibility for our reproductive futures. Next slide. The first question of the survey asked respondents to rank what issue was most important to them. You can see from these results that healthcare, and this was even before COVID, was the most critically important issue, with the climate crisis a close second. Next slide. As noted by others' previous research, our survey also showed the overwhelming majority, about 80%, agree that all types of birth control should be legal, free, and easily accessible. Next slide. However, as we work on these solutions, it's important to keep in mind reproductive health care is riddled with inequalities. One example is that it's harder for Black women to get condoms due to shorter pharmacy hours near their homes, fewer female pharmacists and self-checkout lanes that make them feel comfortable, and often condoms are locked in a closed cabinet. These are just a couple of examples from a report, but the reproductive justice movement was founded by Black women calling for a new approach that recognizes the unique needs of women of color and understands reproductive freedom as a life or death issue. In the environmental movement, we must embrace those basic rights and support the struggle for Black, Indigenous, and people of color to have good health care and a safe environment. You'll see from this slide that over 2/3 of survey respondents somewhat or strongly agree with the statement that immigrants, people of color, and other marginalized communities disproportionately lack access to health care. Next slide. So I showed you this slide last time, but I just want to touch on it again. It summarizes the six questions that were in the survey. And we asked about various things that people would advocate for. whether that was at the federal or state level around contraceptive policy or like local sex ed. So here you can see those who said that they're currently doing a behavior, those who said that they're willing to do the behavior, but then what I'm calling the behavioral intention gap, where we need to get people to change from willing to do or currently doing, but willing to do to actually doing. So hopefully this will inform our work going forward. Next slide. Keeping with that theme and talking about 2021 advocacy. So as many of you know, the Supreme Court once again heard arguments challenging the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act, which included guaranteed access to contraception. Recently confirmed Justice Amy Coney Barrett has publicly criticized the act, though it provides access to affordable contraception and life-saving healthcare coverage to 20 million Americans. Her opinion really could decide the law's fate. However, under a Biden presidency, there's good reason to believe reproductive health care will once again be treated as a human right. One of the first things President-elect Biden will most likely do is rescind the Mexico City policy, also referred to the global gag rule. So many of you might know about this policy if you've been working in this for a while. It denies US funding to healthcare clinics around the world that provide information or services about legal abortion. Domestically, Biden could reverse the Trump administration's Title X rule, which under this domestic gag rule has been limiting reproductive health care services in low-income communities across the country, similarly because they are talking about abortion. Finally, abortion ballot measures in Colorado and Louisiana show the divide on this issue. Colorado, one of 7 states that currently doesn't prohibit abortion at any point during a pregnancy, struck down a measure that would nearly have banned all abortion after 22 weeks. But on the other hand, Louisiana approved a constitutional amendment stating that their state does not protect the right to an abortion, meaning it will be difficult to keep abortion legal in the state if Roe v. Wade is overturned. So I went through all that quickly. If you want more information about the global gag rule or Title X, please put your questions in the chat. We can go over those at the end. And the center did just publish an official statement regarding our stance on abortion. So from my comments here today, you can see that we see it as a human right, just like any other healthcare option. So if you want to review our statement, Sarah just placed that in the chat also. All right, and with that, I want to turn it over to Dr. Grossman, who is going to tell us all about family planning. And I know I'm going to learn something, and I need to take my family planning health worker certification again. So I'm going to take copious notes, Doctor. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I want to start off by saying that the Center for Biological Diversity is one of my very favorite organizations, partially because of the work they do with endangered species, but also especially because they've recognized and are one of very few organizations in this country that recognize the interrelationship between human population and loss of species. I hadn't realized that until just now. I guess I was reminded that I'm supposed to be speaking about the empowerment of gender, of women. I'm not so used to the new talk, but I can't think of anything better to disempower women than having one or more unplanned children. I wanted to start off just by looking at all the options that are available now. So with the first slide or the next slide. I wrote an editorial for the Journal of Conservation Biology about why it's so important to talk about human population. And unfortunately, there hasn't been much attention among conservation scientists on population. So that just increases my admiration for the center even more. Next slide. There's a book that was published. I don't think it was a bestseller. I borrowed its title for this. It shows the first part of 16 different contraceptive methods that are currently available. I, by accident, actually highlighted the emergency contraception. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about that. Emergency contraceptive pills are available to anybody, primarily to women, regardless of age. They don't require a prescription. Some of the pill packages will have actually 2 pills in them, and it's most effective if the woman who got exposed to pregnancy had unprotected intercourse, takes both of those pills at the same time. And it's wise to take them as soon as possible after unprotected intercourse. The effectiveness declines fairly rapidly. I'm getting a call. It's best to take the pills shortly after unprotected intercourse. And some people have even recommended for women who are at risk to have a package of the emergency contraceptive pills at home. It's kind of like having a fire in your home. If you have a fire extinguisher, the chances of putting out the fire immediately are much greater than if you have to get in your car, go to Walmart, buy a fire extinguisher, and head back home. Emergency contraception is not 100% effective, but it's pretty darn good. It's over 90% effective if taken within the first 12 hours of a ruptured condom or other reason for needing emergency contraception. Also, here on the right-hand side, the third illustration from the top is a picture of an IUD with copper. Copper containing IUDs are even more effective. They're 99+% effective in preventing an unplanned pregnancy after an accident, unprotected intercourse. And there are up to 5 days that the woman has to get this inserted. In many places that might be difficult because you can't do it yourself. You have to call, make an appointment, etc. But many providers are now aware of the importance of getting folks in immediately if they have had unprotected intercourse and want emergency contraception. The next slide has some more contraceptive methods that are available. Down at the bottom are, on the right-hand side, are 2 things that are permanent, female and male sterilization. I think day after tomorrow is World Vasectomy Day for anybody who's interested. Next slide. So this is what's new in birth control. And I don't know much about these contraceptive methods. This looks a little bit like a grease gun. I've never seen a Phexi or however it's pronounced. Their advertising is that it's great for use in the moment. It is 90% effective in preventing pregnancy, but it's also expensive. It's about $20 for one of these grease guns. Next slide. I don't think Phexi is going to be a great seller. The Kaya has been around for a couple of years. It's not that new. My parents had 2 children, me being one. My sister was born roughly 10 years after they were married. I never talked to them. They'd both be over 110 years old if they were still alive now, which they are unfortunately not. Never asked them what they used for birth control, but I suspect they used diaphragms. Diaphragms must be used with a spermicide, something that kills sperm. In the past, diaphragms came in different sizes, and it was necessary to fit the woman for the correct size. The diaphragm needs to be put in before intercourse, and its diaphragms are about 85% effective in preventing pregnancy. The Kaya is great because one size fits most, about 90% of women. And although it's supposed to be available only by prescription, it's available on eBay for about $75 each. They say it's good for a number of years. Actually, because they're made of silicone rubber, I expect that one would last for a decade or maybe longer. Next slide, please. Here's another new form of contraception. It's a great idea in many ways. A Nuvera is a vaginal ring. You can approximate the size by looking at the picture. It's supposed to be soft and fairly flexible, but I think it might be a little bit awkward to wander around with this. The deal is that the woman leaves it in except when she's having intercourse, and it should only be out for a couple of hours. She can put it back in and then take it out for a week every 3 weeks. And during that 1 week, she'll menstruate. The cost is more than $2,000. It's very effective. Only 3% of women will have a failure in a year. But unless you have insurance that covers it, they're hoping that Obamacare will do so. It would be difficult for most people to afford. Next slide. This is not available yet in the USA. It's an IUD that is, I think it's 17 little copper balls that are strung on a very flexible metallic wire. And it has been used by over 90,000 women with very good results. Its effectiveness is more than 99%, the same as other IUDs. The advantage of it is that because it's very flexible, that wire is springy, but very soft and flexible. It might be better tolerated than other IUDs that are now available in the USA. Next slide. So what's the difference between men and women? There are lots of differences, but one of the ones that I like to point out is that women make 1 egg most of the time every month for a number of years, obviously. Men make dozens of sperm every second, and that duration can be many more years. The only things that are available to men at the present are vasectomy, which is permanent, and although it can be reversed, 90% effectiveness rate, reversing a vasectomy is expensive, and it has about a 10% failure rate. Condoms, male condoms, and also withdrawal. So this is a step in the right direction. It's a tiny little switch-like thing that can be embedded inside the man's scrotum. And like any other switch, you can turn it on or turn it off. There would be quite a long latency while the sperm count builds up, or if you turn off the BIMEC SLV, it would take a while for all the sperm to get washed out. This is still very experimental, but I'm hoping that it'll turn out to be effective and safe and affordable. Next slide. So I wanted to thank the Center for Biological Diversity for asking me to speak, and especially for the work that you guys do. I already mentioned that it is the only environmental nonprofit that has a real program in the field of population and sustainability. I also wanted to be reminded that if you don't know about endangered species condoms, they're great. I've handed out hundreds of them. I used to work for about 40 years. I had privileges at a Catholic hospital. And one of the nuns and I had a really good relationship. And one day I was speaking at the local college, Fort Lewis College, about birth control, and it was just before Halloween, had 2 orange buckets filled with condoms. And I went up to Sister Sharon and said, "Would you like some of these?" And she said, "None today, thank you." Any case, I also have been writing for a quarter century, a blog, a monthly essay on various aspects of contraception, population, family planning, and abortion. And if you're interested in those subjects, I would appreciate your looking at my blog. Remember the little hyphen there, because the Populations Matters without the hyphen is a wonderful nonprofit that's located in England, but my blog has a hyphen in it. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for asking me to speak. That's it, I think.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grossman. I have plenty of questions, but I think the idea was to open it up. Sarah, I don't know if you want to facilitate or.
Sure. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording first.